Hey everyone, Christina here again for a tutorial for Royal Icing. We've been asked it a lot, so we're finally able to do it. Sorry it took so long. So first I just want to go over the ingredients that I use and all the measurements. And then after we make the Royal Icing, I will go into the different consistencies and then we can go from there. So for our recipe, we're going to use AmeriColor Meringue Powder, which I found online. You can't find it in the store, so I get it off Amazon or their website, and it is nut-free, all nut-free, and that's why I found it, because if you don't know, my cookie journey started because we found out our son was allergic to peanuts. So for his second birthday, I really wanted to bake everything, and that's how I discovered my love for cookies. So we're gonna use 3 tablespoons of the AmeriColor meringue powder and about 7 to 8 tablespoons of lukewarm water and 4 cups of sifted powdered sugar. Now first what we're going to do is we're going to whisk up the meringue powder and the water until it's really fluffy. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. So it's 3 tablespoons of the meringue powder. And this is about 7 to 8 tablespoons of lukewarm water. So I'm going to go ahead and pour it in there. I'm just going to hand mix it, and you just want to do it really fast so you get a nice fluffy texture. A weird angle, so it's a little hard for me. You can see here that it's very fluffy. I'm going to do it a little more just to make sure that the powder is dissolved. And the reason why I do this before adding anything else is to make sure that the icing doesn't have any lumps in it. So it's nice and smooth. Make sure a little bit more. Okay, that looks pretty good. And next I'm going to add the powdered sugar, and I will sift it just to make sure all the lumps are gone. Okay, so I'm going to use the sifter, and we found this at IKEA. It's probably a couple bucks. I'm going to go ahead and remember this is 4 cups of powdered sugar. And just go ahead and sift it. Okay. Now we're going to go ahead and let it mix for about maybe 5 to 7 minutes. And you can see here that there's like some chunks kind of sticking, so I will go ahead and just scrape that off. And you could also use a spray bottle if you just want to make sure that everything gets off the sides. So we mix it for about 5 minutes and it's pretty much done. And how you know it's done is it forms a soft peak. Let's see where that soft peak that you're getting, that's what you want. This creates stiff icing. And I usually will take it out of the mixer and separate it into bowls, into whatever colors I need, and then mix it in different bowls on whatever consistency I need. Now if you just needed a big batch of one color icing and you wanted it to be flooding icing really thin, you could add more water in here. Alright, so now I'm going to go ahead and we're going to go through different consistencies, and I'm going to make black icing. Because I know for a lot of darker colors like black and red, I get a lot of questions about bleeding and why that happens. So the first thing is I'm just going to get some into a bowl. And another thing I wanted to point out is I don't add any flavoring to my icing. The taste of this AmeriColor meringue powder is pretty good. And again, you know, a lot of people use like vanilla or any other flavoring, but that's a preference. So I'm just gonna mix in here. Now when I'm making my colors, I always add the color to the icing when it's at the stiff consistency. I do not add it when it's thinner. It just mixes better. And when I'm making, I have a spray bottle, and I do use AmeriColor gel paste, food coloring as well. Another option you can use is the Sugar Arts Master Elites, which I don't have now, but I'm hoping to get some during the restock. It's important to know that when you're doing colors like black, red, the icing will darken over time. So you really need to let it develop. I think a common mistake is when you're adding the food coloring, it's not looking black or red immediately. So you're adding more, but less is more, trust me. It prevents bleeding, it helps with any bitter tasting in your icing, and you just need to let it develop. So I'm gonna go ahead and add a couple drops. And really for the black, it's just gonna be like a dark gray that we're gonna make. So I'm gonna go ahead and stir it. Okay, so that's still kind of a light gray, so I'm gonna add a couple more drops, not too much though. Okay, so that's a jar. It doesn't look black, but it's pretty dark gray. And now it's really, what consistency do you want to make? And I use a spray bottle when adding, and I use a little bit of water at a time just to make sure you don't overdo it and thin it out too much. But first I'm gonna go ahead, I'm gonna just have side by side different consistencies. So the first consistency is stiff consistency, which is what we made, which was right out of the mixer. And if you see, it has that soft peak, it really holds its form. And that consistency is really used for flowers, succulents, any type of shape that really needs to hold its form. That's what I would use this consistency for. The next consistency that I'll make is going to be piping consistency, and what I usually use that for is for lettering, and you can use it for outlining, creating dimension if you want. So I'm going to go ahead and add just a couple sprays of water. And you're thinking, what does piping consistency look like? It's kind of like soft ice cream where it still holds its form, but it'll spread a little bit. It's perfect for lettering. So it still has a soft peak, but you can see it kind of folds over more. Actually like it a little thinner. So I'm gonna put it here so you can just see the difference. So it's a little, you can see it's a little smoother. The peak is starting to fold down. This is more stiff. So this is your piping consistency. You can use it for outlines. You can use it for lettering. When I do my cookies, I like to use one consistency, which is the next consistency that we're gonna do, which I like to call a medium consistency or a 20-second consistency. So I'm gonna go ahead and add a little water. The best description I can give you for a medium consistency is that it'll flow like honey. And some more. And I also like to use medium consistency because it could help with bleeding. If the thinner your consistency is, the more possibility of bleeding there is, especially if you used a lot of the food coloring. Okay, I think we got it. And really, getting the consistency down is just practice. You just have to practice. What works for you? Do you like to use two different consistencies? A lot of people like to use an outline consistency and then a flooding consistency. Some people like to use just one consistency, which is what I prefer. Okay, so that's pretty much done. So I lift it up. It's coming down like honey. It's not immediately smoothing out. Usually takes about 20 seconds. It is on a thicker side, but that's what I prefer. So let's just put it here. So you see it doesn't immediately smooth out. It kind of takes a little while, about 15-20 seconds. And that's the consistency I prefer. So I'm actually making icing that I'm going to use this week. So I'm going to take most of this icing and bag it, and then I'll show you the flooding consistency. And the bags that I use are from Truly Mad Plastics. I love their tipless piping bags. I've also used Grunlessly Delicious. They have pretty great tipping bags as well. So I use just any tall cup that you have. Put the bag down. This makes it easier for me to put the icing in. I'm gonna put most of it in there. And I just use a rubber band. You could use a clip, whatever you prefer. Okay. And we'll actually come back to this bag so you can see how dark the color gets within like a couple hours. So if I have dark colors like red or black, I usually make the icing and I wait a couple hours before using them, just so the color really develops. And as time goes on, it will get darker and darker and darker. So be sure to make enough icing. Sometimes I make extra icing just to be on the safe side, so that if I run out, because you won't get the same color again if you try to replicate it.
Many hours later.
So now we're gonna make flooding consistency, which is a pretty thin consistency. If you have cookies that you need to flood, which large cookies, large areas of one color, I recommend using flooding because it'll get you through faster. And with flooding consistency, you pick it up and it kind of, when it drops down, it smooths out almost instantly. You just really need to like shimmy it and it should be good. So this is pretty much good. So I'll put it side by side here so you can see. So it's almost instantly smoothing out, as you can see. So that's pretty much it. So I really just wanted to give you the recipe that I use, show you the steps that I took, and show you the different consistencies. And some things that I just want to recap is that the meringue powder and water, I whisk thoroughly until it's fluffy before adding the powdered sugar. It prevents lumps in your icing and really just makes the icing smooth. The recipe that I gave you creates a stiff icing with a soft peak to it. And I use that recipe and then I put it into bowls and then I thin it out to whatever consistency that I want. So the consistencies again that I showed you were stiff consistency, has a soft peak, piping consistency, which still has pretty much a soft peak but spreads a little bit easily, and I use that mainly for lettering, but you can use it for outlining if you wanted to do two different consistencies when you're doing your cookies. You can do it piping consistency and a flooding consistency together. But my favorite would be the next one, which is the medium consistency or 15 to 20 second consistency. What I like to call it is it's honey, flows like honey. That's the consistency I use. I like to use one consistency for all of my cookies. And it's not as thin and it really helps prevent bleeding. Another tool that I use that helps prevent bleeding is a dehydrator. It dries up the icing quicker than letting it air dry, and we can go into another tutorial about that as well. And then there's the flooding consistency. If you have a lot of cookies that are large, that has a large base of just one color, I recommend using the flooding consistency because it'll go so much smoother. When using the medium consistency, you will have to use a scribe or a toothpick to smooth it out, and you have to do it almost instantly, quickly, because it dries quickly and it starts to crust over. With the flooding consistency, you really don't need to use a scribe. You can literally just shake the cookie and it'll smooth out instantly. So that is my recipe, and those are the consistencies that I have used. If there's any other tutorials that you'd like for us to do, please let us know in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching. Again, this is Christina from Armstina's Cookies, and I really hope that I helped with your royal icing journey. It really takes just a lot of practice. You just have to do it over and over again. I'm still learning to this day, and I still have times where my icing bleeds, or it's too thin or too thick. It's really just trial and error, and you just have to keep at it. Thank you.